Hi everybody, this is the second part of Chapter 3, Section 3, titled Cycles of Matter. In the first part of this video, you guys learned about the water cycle, or I should say you reviewed the water cycle, and talked about the carbon cycle. The third cycle is the nitrogen cycle. Now, nitrogen is really important because living things use nitrogen to make proteins. Nitrogen gas is the most abundant form of nitrogen on Earth. In fact, our atmosphere is composed of between 70 and 80% nitrogen gas, but it doesn't do us any good because only certain bacteria can use this form, nitrogen gas, directly. These bacteria live in the soil and on the roots of plants called legumes. They convert nitrogen gas into ammonia in a process called nitrogen fixation. They're taking nitrogen gas and they're fixing it to a more usable form. Other bacteria in the soil then take the ammonia and they change it into nitrates and nitrites. Don't worry about the difference between nitrates and nitrites. Just know that these are forms that we can use. Once these products, nitrates and nitrites, are available, producers can use them to make proteins. Consumers then eat the producers and they reuse the nitrogen to make their own proteins. So the nitrogen gas was changed by the bacteria, changed by a second bacteria into nitrates and nitrites, made into proteins. We eat those producers, we rebuild those nitrates and nitrites into our own proteins. Once an organism dies, decomposers take the nitrogen in the proteins and break them down as ammonia. Ammonia can then be taken up by other producers. If it's not taken up by other producers, different bacteria takes those nitrates and nitrites, right, and pushes them back into nitrogen gas through a process called nitrogen or denitrification. So nitrogen fixation takes nitrogen gas and makes it into a usable form. Denitrification takes the usable form and puts it back into nitrogen gas. The process of denitrification releases nitrogen back into the atmosphere again. Our final biogeochemical cycle is the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is essential for organisms because it helps to make molecules like DNA and RNA. DNA is your genetic blueprint, and RNA reads the genetic blueprint to help make the proteins necessary for you to be you. Most phosphorus on Earth exists in the form of inorganic phosphate. Inorganic phosphate is released into the soil and the water as sediment wears down. These phosphates eventually will enter the ocean where marine organisms use them. One place you won't find the phosphates in the phosphorus cycle is the atmosphere. It doesn't ever change into a gas state. Some phosphates will stay on land and they'll cycle between the organisms and the soil. All right? Plants will bind that phosphate into their inorganic compounds, which consumers use and reuse and then release back into the soil. Organic phosphates move through the food web out to the rest of the ecosystem. So just like water or carbon or nitrogen, these things all pass through the different parts of the food web. Now, primary productivity in an ecosystem is a new term for you. Primary productivity is the rate at which organic matter is created by producers. In other words, how fast do autotrophs take the sun's energy and produce food with it? One factor that controls primary productivity is the amount of available nutrients. How much is there for plants to use to make into food? If a nutrient is in short supply, it's going to limit an organism's growth. Seems pretty obvious. If the things aren't there that are needed to grow, the organism can't grow. When an ecosystem is limited by a single nutrient, whether it's scarce or whether it just cycles really slowly in the environment, we call that substance a limiting nutrient. When an aquatic ecosystem receives a really large amount of a limiting nutrient, like when there's runoff from a fertilized field. The result is often a really fast and immediate increase in the amount of algae or other producers in that aquatic ecosystem. We call this an algal bloom. Algae blooms disrupt the equilibrium of that ecosystem. Now, the trouble with algal blooms is when you have like a farm pond and it's in equilibrium, there's enough producers, enough consumers, there's a nice balance, and you get the runoff from a farm field after it's been fertilized. Now you have a lot of those things that the algae need. A bunch of them grow, and a bunch of them grow and grow and grow, but they grow so quickly that they tend to die quickly. And when they die quickly, it changes the balance between producers and consumers. And that affects the whole food chain as it works its way through. Alright, once again, these are the vocabulary terms and the key concepts for Chapter 3, Section 3. Being able to understand and define these key terms will definitely help you be able to answer the key concepts. Good luck and study hard.